Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's Financial Security for All Community of Practice webinar. Today, we're talking about K12 financial literacy and how that can relate to extension educators. We'll be looking at standards, talking about professional development opportunities, and ways for extension to partner with other organizations and educators. We're happy to have with us today from our own community of practice, Dr. Becky Smith, who is with Mississippi State University, and Dr. Elizabeth Kish, who is with Kansas State University. And then also our guest speaker, Selena Schwartzfeger, who is with the Mississippi Council on Economic Education. So just a few quick housekeeping details. I'll be monitoring the Q&A. So this is webinar format. If you have questions, feel free to pop those into the Q&A, and I will be sure that we circle around to your question or comment. But we also have the chat available, so there will be some engagement opportunities along the way that will ask you to do things in the chat. And then I think our speakers have set up for us today an opening poll. So we'll go to that before the presentation begins. So it looks like, how engaged are you with your state's economic and personal finance network? Looks like right now the biggest group are slightly engaged. And how familiar are you with your state economic and personal finance standards? Looks like most of us are somewhat, but also some are not very familiar. So you can see results here. Very engaged, 16%, slightly engaged, and or not engaged are the two top in that question, and somewhat familiar or not very familiar are the biggest responses in familiarity with state economic and personal finance standards. Okay. Thanks, everyone, and we're looking forward to hearing from our panel of experts today.
All right, Laura, thank you very much for having us. We're excited to be here today with everybody, and happy to see those results from the poll, and hopefully we can kind of move those further to the right today. So, or up, I guess. So, all right, let me see. I'm going to drive the slides here today. We do want you to participate. It is set up in a webinar, but we really have a lot of questions for you. And if you have questions along the way, please pop those in. Any comments that can kind of help us, ground us, it would be great. We are always learning as well. So all right, so we've already done the poll question. You've already been reminded what we're going to do, so we're just going to jump in. I wanted to just start by talking about how I have been able to be engaged with the K12 work. Actually, it's over 20 years now in Mississippi. So in some capacity, whether I was doing workshops or whether I was an assistant director or running the center, it was the first 10 years, it was actually in the College of Business in the department that I was in. And then when I moved into extension in 2012, the center came with me. And over that time, I've done all kinds of workshops. These are just ones that I could think of in the moment, but all different kinds of economics and personal finance topics, but also the like pedagogy and just critical thinking, working on. This Saturday, I did a retirement workshop for teachers, had 40 people show up. So it was, we're kind of excited about that. So this summer, getting to do one on the Taylor Swift economics and ethics and economics. So lots of in creativity and engagement there. The master teacher of economics, which you'll hear about in just a little bit, but that is something I've been involved in from the beginning. And then also been in classrooms. So not just doing teacher workshops, but in classrooms with students, trying to see like the whole process all the way through, whether we're doing real world budget simulations or doing economics lessons. And haven't really integrated extension too much into that process, though I'm trying to figure out how to do that more now. There's a lot of opportunities as far as research that needs to be done, including our baseline study, and really what there's all kind of work that could be done if we had more time and effort. But I put a few quotes on here just because kind of like the grounding force, the thing that keeps me coming back to it. And I'm so very committed to it, and I see such value to it. When I'm with teachers, I try to tell them they are Mississippi's most important economic developers. I'm a community economic development person, as well as family resource management. And so we hear a lot about, oh, we got to economic development this, and we got to do it this way and that way. And we think about bringing in firms, we think about even the advanced thinking, like enlightened thinking of economic development is getting higher quality of life. But at the end of the day, teachers are the ones that are developing that human capital. And that is the basis of our economic development. So that is my big pitch. I am going to introduce to you my special friend and colleague. I introduced her as the dynamic president of the Mississippi Council on Economic Education the other day, and she liked it, so I'm going to say it again. But we've been working together for most of the 20 years that I have been on this journey. And she has taken the Mississippi Council to the very top. And it's very exciting to be in Mississippi and get to say, listen, we're at the top of this list, a good list. Selena is going to talk a little bit about herself and how she came into this work, and then how the council works, and just an example of Mississippi. And she is very connected to what is happening in the network in the nation. And so she will probably be able to answer questions even outside of Mississippi. So Selena, if you would take the floor.
Thanks, Becky. Yeah, we've been friends for a long time. You talked about being in this for 20 years. I've been in my role for 14 years as president of the Mississippi Council on Economic Education. But prior to that, I was asked just to tell you a little bit about who I am before we go on to the next two slides. I went to school to be in business, like to be my long-term goal was to be a CEO somewhere. And I'm here, like that's what I do. I'm the CEO president of this organization. But my degrees are all in business. I've got a master's of business administration. And I worked in that field for about 15 years and then felt this calling to teach. And it is a calling, as you all know, if you're an educator. And so I went through the alternate route for a license for teaching in Mississippi. That's an option. And what that does is it takes somebody that's an expert in their field and gets them classroom ready, because we all know that's a different world. And so I was teaching. I actually went through the Master Teacher of Economics program with MCE and did other programs. I was teaching personal finance at the high school level, is what I was doing in what I call my second career. And then I was recruited into this position 14 years ago, and it has been an amazing, wonderful 14 years. I mean, I can count on probably one hand the days that I have not wanted to get up and go to work over all that time. And I think that's just quite amazing. So, over these 14 years, I've served on multiple education related boards, both at the state level and at the national level. So I feel like I've got this really unique perspective, especially with these councils generally being nonprofit organizations. I've got a unique perspective of what business and education can do together. So that's about me. Becky, if you want, there we go. Okay. So the next thing I want to do is just explain how this creature lives in the United States of America. And by this creature, I mean all of these organizations that exist for the purpose of increasing economic and financial literacy, primarily through teacher prep. So that's what makes us different, is that we are focused on the K12 structure, but teacher prep. So we don't go in for the most part and do direct student education. And the reason this model works so well is because if you prepare a teacher to teach content today, then that teacher will be able to continue. Not only do they reach, and the formula that's used is usually a teacher reaches 100 students a year. I know it's less for elementary, but it can be more for high school. So that's the generally accepted formula. So we're preparing teachers to reach those students this year and next year and the year after that and the year after that. And so they have such a strong influence over students. That's why this model works. So what does this model look like? At the national level, there is an organization called the Council for Economic Education. One thing I wanted to be clear about on this chart, I really wanted those to be dotted lines, not solid lines, but I decided it wasn't worth going in and trying to figure that out. But I want you to know that there are informal relationships generally between all of these groups. So the National Council for Economic Education is in New York City. They've been around for 70 years. Their job started out being one to make sure that states had local councils for economic education, among other things. Like they help create curriculum and things like that. But what I'm showing you on this chart is how it looks in Mississippi, but how it can look different in other states. So in Mississippi, the next layer for us is that we have a council for economic education, and we're located in Jackson. And I run that organization along with 2.5 other employees. And our job is we've got lots of jobs, but one of our jobs is to be the glue that holds together the centers and the council. And we do fundraising, and we have the board of directors that manages our direction. And we in Mississippi do all the teacher recruiting and management. So we're that piece where if a center wants to do a workshop, and that's Becky, so she's a center director. In Mississippi, the way it works is we always do this together. Like we're a team, we're a family, and we don't generally try to go out and do things on our own. I showed you here, we actually have 5 centers in Mississippi, but our most active ones are Becky's Center at Mississippi State, and then historically a center at the University of Southern Mississippi called the Hatchery. Over time, those center directors, and I believe Becky would agree with me on this, have been pulled in so many different directions. Like back in the day, they got released from the universities or colleges to do this work, and that's not necessarily happening anymore. So it really has to be somebody like Becky that has a passion for this work that makes the time. And there can be compensation between the council and the center. So when Becky does work For her, generally, we'll pay her center. But then we've got other centers that we pay the actual person. So that I don't want to get into the weeds, but I just want you to understand kind of how this works. In some states, there's not an active council on economic education. And when that happens, centers can exist on their own. I'm thinking in the state of Kansas. I know that's one for sure that maybe used to have a council that went defunct, and when it went defunct, the centers remained. And so they just do their own thing. And they can have a direct association with the national council. And then a new model that the council has created within the past year is that they can also just work with individuals. So let's take a state like Texas. Texas had a council that went defunct, like they opened the doors. And then they had centers around the state, which there are two that I know of that still exist. But one of those people I think is pretty close to retirement. So anyway, if the National Council had funding to reach teachers and students in Texas, they have a new model where they can work directly with a person. So there doesn't even have to be a center or a council for that to exist. Okay, so that's the structure, and I can probably, I noticed on the poll there were some of you that said you didn't even know that this existed in your state. So it would be really interesting if those of you that said that could in the chat tell us where you are. Then I can tell you probably off the top of my head whether maybe you didn't know about it because it doesn't exist, or maybe you didn't know about it because they're not very active, or maybe you didn't know about it but they're very vibrant in your state and I can tell you how to connect with them. Okay,
Selena,
yes.
Selena, hey, thanks. So or I was just going to say, I know we've noticed we have several on from Arkansas, and in Arkansas we do have economic education very strong and active. Some of you may know Marsha Masters, who is kind of our contact there. We're also all together involved in the Arkansas Jumpstart Coalition. So just one more thing as we're going forward, Selena, I noticed that when you turn your head away from directly in your mic, I get a little bit of feedback. So if you could just, and we all want to hear what you're saying. So if you could just keep directing your voice right toward your mic. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a new laptop, and so I really should be using headphones. I think I need to do that. But thank you, Laura, for pointing that out. I saw some states coming in on the chat. One was New Mexico. Well, let me back up just a minute. Yes, there is Jumpstart. Jumpstart National, which I failed to put on a slide. In Mississippi, I am also the president of Jumpstart. We are not extremely active with Jumpstart because NCEE already does all those things. But in some of these states where you don't have, let's go back to Texas. They don't have a council for economic education that's active anymore, but I think Jumpstart is fairly active. So that would be your other group that you could work with. Can somebody tell me the other states that they put in the chat so that I'm not looking away from my microphone? And I can give some feedback on those.
We have Indiana.
Okay, Indiana does have a council for economic education. I'm not sure how active they are, but you do have one.
Arizona?
Arizona, very active.
And
Arizona,
New Mexico.
And New Mexico, I don't know of New Mexico having a council. Indiana somewhat active. Yeah, that's what I would have guessed just from what I know.
And then Wisconsin.
They have a council somewhat active.
And then I noticed Travis Mountain is on here. I think he's in Georgia.
Georgia, very, very active. Yes. Another thing you might find though, like in Mississippi, we focus equally on economics, personal finance, and even entrepreneurship. Some state councils will have a primary focus just on economics, and they'll, rely on Jumpstart to take care of the personal finance. I'm seeing some other states come up here. Colorado. Colorado has a really active council. They're called something different though, like the Colorado something about financial literacy. But if you're not, you can go to the Council for Economic Education website. And when I'm not speaking, I can drop that in the chat, or maybe Becky, you can do that. You can go to their website and click on your state, and it will tell you the center and the council and the centers that exist there. All right,
In
I'm
Iowa,
almost
did we
over
get
my
Iowa? Did we do Iowa?
Iowa, maybe a little bit active. Um, I'm a little less familiar with them. Okay, so I'm over my 10 minutes. So let me just close up. My last slide, I was asked to, is there anything else here? I thought there was going to be another little piece in that open, what, no, all right, it must not have come across. So, the last piece I'm going to talk about is how you can engage with your council or center. The first step is to find out who they are. And you can do that at the CEE website. But in Mississippi, and Becky has already talked about this a little bit, we have these master teacher programs, which are really high level trainings. Well, I shouldn't say high level, they're deep trainings, they're extensive trainings, they're 75 content hour trainings that we do with teachers across the state. And then we've got student programs such as the Economics Challenge and the Personal Finance Challenge. There's so many more things that we do that I just don't have time to talk to you about today, but you can reach out to me at any time afterwards if you want to have a conversation. But what I would suggest is that you reach out to your local council or center if you're interested and tell them you would like to be a partner. I will tell you, as a council president, when Becky said Extension wants to start working, in this area, I thought that's amazing because it expands our reach. It gives us a presence in counties that maybe we don't have centers or council located in. The thing to remember, well, one thing that I thought would work really well for us moving forward are our family financial fund nights. And we haven't gotten to really explore that yet, but these are programs that are offered directly to parents and their children. And so no teachers are involved in this. That's a great partnership with Extension. Um, Everything is provided that's needed. It's low cost. It's high impact. So I had some other cheat notes on that little box that's not showing up, but I think that's everything I was supposed to talk about.
Yeah, Selena, thank you. It's awesome. And I'm sure we'll have lots of questions and can come back to it. So, yeah, the family financial fund nights we're just get kind of unrolling that, unveiling it in Extension. So, one of the challenges is that they often happen at nighttime when families can get together. And so working with Extension, finding agents that are willing to work in the evenings, I think that's going to be one of the challenges. But the family financial fund nights, you set up, it's not like real world, but it is like you set up the different tables and they go and they learn about different topics. So taxes or investing or budgeting. And they do it as a family with a group and they go around the room and it's a great night. So there are different programs that really do, I think, because I have had Extension agents say, oh yeah, I want to do that. So it's just a matter of like trying to figure out the logistics of that. So here we are going to talk a little bit about some of the things that the council and Jumpstart produces as far as knowing how to get informed and knowing what your teachers need to be delivering, and many of them aren't prepared to do that. And so Extension can really fill in a gap. But the survey of the states, this latest one, and I'm not going to go really into these too deeply. We've got several things we still want to cover. But just know that this is the status of the economic education, and like these are the slide deck has these, all of these have links in them, and you can go and click on. But if you were to go to the report, and I think, yes, okay, Andrew's dropping those links, thank you. You can go and look and see what it is, where your state is. Selena, just in like a minute or something, couple of minutes, can you talk about the process of what a state has to go through? I'm also going to put the NEFI one, which is a little bit different than this one. So how, like, what does it mean? What standard had to be, what bar had to be crossed?
Right. Okay, so that was one of the things I was supposed to talk about. So this particular report is put out by the National Council for Economic Education, and the data is collected. If there's a council or center there, they'll just come to us and we answer a survey that basically indicates, okay, does your state require economics for graduation? Does your state require personal finance for graduation? If they do, are those topics taught in a standalone class or are they taught inside of another class? Is testing required? So they also could go to your state Department of Education to collect that data. And then every 2 years, they just come back to whoever their contact is and we update the information. I will tell y'all though, in the state of Mississippi, we do have a fairly new personal finance requirement that's over a semester long, but it's called College and Career Readiness. It's a year-long course, and like 75% of it is personal finance. So I had to personally lobby with organizations who are collecting this data to recognize that we do indeed have required personal finance, and not only is it required, but it's more than a semester. There's another group that collects data, and they want to know who has to take a 1 semester required course in these topics. And so that's different than a state that says, yes, we teach it inside of math. Or yes, we teach it inside of a social studies course. So this just helps you dig down and see where are the requirements and how significant are the requirements and how much proof is there that the content is being actually taught in the classroom.
Great, thank you. And so I did want to also put in the NEFI. They're very similar, but some differences as far as, and they're just on personal finance. So the council has data on the economics requirement as well. But you can see so they've got like partial, and then you can see also the timeline as more and more states are adopting. So also found this, so states that require personal finance for graduation. So there are different levels, states that have a partial personal finance education requirement, and then states that don't have any. So if you're wanting to start figuring out how to do this and where to do this and all of that, these are the folks that are in these networks that have done it and are people to reach out to. One of the things I wanted to say is that normally they don't come with any money. So they, in 2008 is when the economics became required for graduation, but it didn't come with any plan to train the teachers. And so just because you have this mandate, it is essentially unfunded, and there is a huge gap in the teacher training for it. So it provides this this opportunity for extension to fill some of that gap. Working with the council is good for me because I struggle to have enough time to go get an audience. And so the council manages setting up dates, gets the registration, they do evaluation, and I literally just got to show up. I bought ice the other day, but other than that, like it's really just me and getting to do my content thing. So, all right. So Elizabeth and I are going to shift to talk about the standards. And so Elizabeth is going to talk about her background and some jumpstart.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, it's good to see some familiar names and also some new names in the participant list. Some of you know a bit about my background, but I might just share because as I was thinking through this, this is really working with youth and working with teachers has been a through line all the way, even though those of us in extension do so many things, right? So my first exposure to personal finance education in the schools was actually as a grad student. And back in the day when NEFI had the high school financial planning program, and one of my faculty advisors worked with that program. And then later in a previous state in another job, we were getting sort of these stipends from NEFI to do financial education. And so we, on behalf of that institution, we received the stipends, and I was also involved in getting that Jumpstart Coalition going in that state. One thing I would say is these things ebb and flow, right? Especially the coalitions. And so you can see that the Jumpstart Coalition was founded in 1995, and originally it was K through 12, and now the focus really is preschool through college. But the idea is this is a coalition which does include the Council for Economic Education on a national level and hopefully in our state levels, as well as many other organizations. So it really is the big tent in many ways for this work. And they do proudly say that they are the original promoter of April as Financial Literacy Month. And I did include the link if you're not familiar with the link to the Jumpstart organization. A little bit more about myself, though, and why I'm so excited to be here today is my graduate program was a little bit unique in those days that we did coursework in family resource management and personal finance, but also applied economics. So later on in my career, I was able to teach economics at a community college and started teaching a class where they were dual enrolled high school and college students. So that's kind of where I've taught, one example of where I've taught in with K12. Um, and another example is right now at K-State, we have a project, it's a pilot project with our 4-H youth development group, and we have another dual enrolled project where they're getting high school credit, because you might have noticed, well, I'm sure you weren't looking especially for Kansas on Becky's list of where we have graduation requirements, but we do have a graduation requirement in Kansas, and we're trying to figure out how at K-State to respond to that. So that is a bit about my background and just sort of like with the personal finance and economics and how it all goes together. And I have done teacher training. When I first went to Kansas, I used the NEFI state rep money to work with our state Department of Ed to come up with a training model where we would bring together like social studies, math, econ, and family consumer sciences teachers as a team from their schools to teach it across the curriculum. Because even, it's amazing how far we've come. There was a good bit of angst and some competition about, okay, which subject matter is going to get identified to teach this because it's so important, right? And everybody wants to teach it, but I think we can go on, Becky. Sorry.
Awesome.
So in terms of the standards, the first standards for personal finance were published in 1998. They've been updated regularly since then. The current standards were co-published with the Council for Economic Education, and the teams came from economics world, personal finance world, and very multidisciplinary. And I did put a link for the standards. And so the whole idea is that these standards identify knowledge that you need, the skills that you need, and then also really the ultimate is the decision-making ability that young people need and that we hope, and the intent is with these mandates, right, that they will acquire during their education, so that then when they're adults, they're on on a good path, hopefully. So the concepts in the current standards do progress. Obviously, you don't just teach this in 4th grade, 8th grade, or 12th grade, but those are the markers of the grade levels where we hope that students get this. And they do relate, if you're familiar with My Money 5, you'll see there are 6 here because saving and investing are separated out. But there are standards that relate to each of those big concepts. And I would say, so another sort of way that I've been involved in this work is I have been a reviewer on the last few versions of the standards. And also for those of you in cooperative, affiliated with Cooperative Extension, I do represent Cooperative Extension in the land grant system on the National Jumpstart Board. We have historically had representation. At one point, it was through USDA, what is now USDA NIFA, but those program leaders have indicated that is not an appropriate role for them. So for several years, it has rotated among state specialists. So starting out with Barbara O'Neill, who was at Rutgers for many, many years, Jinhee Kim at University of Maryland, and now me. So that's another role that I play.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Elizabeth. That's important.
Yeah, and so I think the next slide, if we can just briefly, shows you this progression. And I chose managing risk because that is one that I think, at least I used to have a bias against it, but now I'm really into it. I don't know why. So you can see that by 4th grade, we want students to understand that people are exposed to risk and there can be a loss and it can be harmful, right? And then by 8th grade, that it's specifically about financial loss from unexpected events. And then by the time they get to high school, it's that we all have different risk tolerances and how much risk we're willing to accept and how much we are going to share through insurance. So that's kind of an example of how they progress.
Perfect. And I'm going to just throw out the economic standards. So like the personal finance standards, the council has they call them voluntary national content standards. And I think a lot of states use these as a basis, but states also have their own as well. Sometimes I can find the national standards in the state standards, and sometimes I'm like, how'd they come up with that? So it's very interesting. But these national standards for personal finance for the council are the same ones. So because, like Elizabeth said, that they got together and created one set, which is nice. And I did just want to kind of throw out that I think as I have walked through extension and working with agents, there has been it's like some territorialness, like, oh, we're doing this, and then feeling like, well, if somebody else is doing it, then they're not on the same team. And it's really good that we have seen that these two have come together. In our world, right, we're each of us have to show credit, and we have to get all of these metrics, and so it sets us up to have to kind of have this, this what could feel like an adversarial thing. But if we take a big step back and realize we really are on the same team, and we don't have enough resources, even if all of our organizations were fully resourced, we don't have enough resources, right? So we got to work together and have that perspective. So it was nice to see some real engagement there. So, but the economics content standards, there are 20, and the benchmarks or the progression are also grade 4, 8, and 12. And so this is just how they look. Again, these are standards. What is actually happening in the classroom is a whole nother story. But we have a couple of questions that we wanted to ask now. If you could just put in the chat about your relations with your state Econ Ed Council or your state Jumpstart, like how some of you are slightly, work with them. Some of you very involved. What does that look like for you? Just answer. We said scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is like, we are the best partners ever. Kind of that's where we're kind of going with that. So if you could put that in the chat, that would be awesome. Also interested in what are you doing to connect with your state K12. Some states are like way ahead. Tennessee, they have a special commission, and there's money for, and Extension fills the gap and does tons of teacher training. And has even got a curriculum written in the gap of NEFI's letting go of their high school materials. So just also very interested. We hope that this would be an exchange so that we could share good ideas. So all right, so we're going to shift and finish up and talk about best practices and engaging audiences and delivering material. So another way we wanted to exchange is what works with teachers. And so I see Travis has got a question. If any state extension is providing personal finance education and collecting fees, right, for doing this, which I remember when the center at Mississippi State started, and we were busy out trying to, get teachers who are already working such an amazing job, right? And then asking them to pay to do something was just crazy. This was when you used to get to have substitutes, and you could do workshops during the week. And our provost was like, now you need to be charging these teachers. And we were just like laughing, like, no, you don't understand. Like that's not going to work. So what does work with teachers, and what the National Council does and what the State Council does, I think Selena didn't really touch on this, but most of her job is out getting funding. She is out hammering hard to be able to put materials in the hands of the teachers, to be able to pay for the CEUs, we even pay stipends. So depending upon the program, there is actually money for the teacher. So that's what's working. Food is very important if we're doing an all-day workshop. So we now go.
Could I just say though about that, and I did put it in the chat, it depends on the state though, because some states don't require CEUs, or they may, but they also may require college credit for different things, in which case, in response to Travis's question, there might, depending what your relationship is with your academic enterprise at the university and how the tuition and fees flow through, there would be a cost.
Yeah, so I didn't, okay, that also, so Mississippi State, we also have like a unit that you can go through and apply, get CUs, where teachers would pay and do that. And some will pay for it, right? I'd be interesting to kind of survey the network and see what's the correlation between that funding model and the impact that we're having, right? What I am saying is, like, in Mississippi, this is what we have, where we are now. And Selena, chime in here. I was on a call with the different center directors last month, and they were asking about how do we get to reach the teachers? And some of them are like, well, we just switched to online now and it's working amazingly. And then the other center directors were like, no, we can't get any online. We're back and people want it in person. So it, as Elizabeth said, like it absolutely depends upon where you are. I think it really depends upon where you are in your market saturation, like how where is the need and how much of it have you met? So I think it also, there is a dynamic process there. So let's see. So yeah, well, what's working for where you guys are, I guess. Like to know that, but we're going to go ahead and keep going. We've got in our last few minutes. And so that changing model of financial education, where that older model is like this expert, this is back in the theme of best practices. So, so the old model is definitely like, okay, this is what financial success looks like, and this is what you should do. That is changing away from that sage. On the sage, as the research is showing us, that it needs to be modeled, it needs to be client focused, because if it's not, then the motivation to be able to have that behavior change is missing. And it just becomes this content knowledge. And as extension has needed to move to be more relevant, to be able to have impact and have behavior change, not just content knowledge, that is a huge gap, that, and a huge, sea change that we're really still trying to figure out. But the new model of financial education is helping with that. And I think learning about behavioral based and motivation based is really the key. Taking care of you first. So main message with teachers, or extension agents, any gatekeeper, is that you need to feel good about this content, whatever that is. And so this is a super old research that NEPI did. 64% of teachers felt qualified to utilize to be able to teach it. So teachers don't feel that good, like parents don't feel that good about communicating about finances with their kids because they don't feel good about where they are. Same way with teachers. So a lot of them don't feel good. So that's something that I really think is an opportunity for us. I think that it has occurred to me that people don't know the difference between income and wealth. Teachers don't know that. And so I talk about, this has been the most impactful slide that I have been able to really help people see that motivation and like help them spark, oh, maybe I do want to pay attention to this. So I talk about this is the curve, and I always apologize for giving a graph, but the income is the hill in the bottom left corner of the slide there. And then if we want it to be somewhat the same in retirement, we're going to have to do some saving when we're in our higher income years. And then I show them the graph on the right, which comes from that handbook of consumer economics. And that is what actually consumption looks like, right? So the different income bands. And so consumption is really, for many people, following the income. And so that has, again, I have found that to be really useful. I found a screening tool for bias content. So we want all of our students, right, to be able to feel connected to the work, and found this out of the state of Washington's Department of Education. And have just now started using this. And I think we're going to see more and more tools around this. And it's also, and whenever you're talking about equity, inclusion and access, not all states, is it really a safe place to do that? So I think knowing your audience, is really important. And how, so I'm in this, I've got all these extension publications, 70 of them or something that are assigned in this area. But some of them have language in them that are not inclusionary. So I'm trying to figure out how do I navigate and move forward. And so I found this tool, but then in using this tool, I've already had pushback from an audience member who didn't appreciate the where it was coming from. So anyways, a little caveat there.
Well, can I just say though, so I think, I don't know if I shared with you, Becky, but we actually adapted that or those resources in Kansas, and we're calling it sort of inclusion, but really we're emphasizing this tool can help us review things so that we can reach audiences that we're not currently reaching, and just leave it at that. Because we all have audiences in a lot of different places that we want to reach. And so that's one way to think about it.
Elizabeth, that is awesome. And I think there's a huge need for that within extension. So I think we need to like really highlight that and spend more time, maybe even a whole webinar on that, because we need help figuring out, especially some of the states where we're not even allowed to say equity. That's a problem, right? How do we do it so that we can, do our work and connect with our students, but not doing it in a way where we're getting in trouble, So, just the effective financial education principles and how to use them. There's a great tool from the CFPB as well as the Asset Funders Network. Basically, the more active we can make this, the more relevant we reduce. Don't just say go to the bank, because like that is many barriers to access, right? Bring the bank to the student, increase those relationships. Elizabeth, you want to take over the next few
Sure. I just
slides?
want to say, I think Becky gave some really concrete examples about best practices. If you want to be a little bit higher level or look at, like if you need some research base, I will share this, that NIFI, this is one of their initiatives when they sort of decided they weren't going to be a program offering or a materials offering entity and a thought leader instead. So this is what they're saying about what factors for effective financial education. And then if you want to keep going, I think I'm talking about CFPB. Yep. Okay. So CFPB has also put some thought and research behind what makes effective educational materials and also educational settings for both youth and adults. And if you're not familiar, there is this curriculum review tool, which I highly recommend. And then if you want to go to the next page, this is how they talk about best practices. And if you start from the middle, it relates to their model, which is an age-based model. And then it talks about at the different ages, what kind of things can you do? And then what the learning strategies are as you go through it. So again, the graphic is helpful, but if you want to dig deeper, the link is there.
And just finishing up, so some places where if you're interested in getting some more learning around this, the National Association of Economic Educators, that has got a lot. I know most of the folks online are probably personal finance, more motivated to do that. That is absolutely personal finance education as well. That meets and Selena can talk about that. She's a past president. That met just I guess in February, in Atlanta. And next year it's gonna be in Philadelphia. And it's generally like we meet with the Federal Reserve Bank somewhere because they sponsor us. So the C tree is of the American Economic Association, is where the best research is being done, and is an opportunity to present each year. And that comes up at the end of May, which is always right when our 4-H club congress is. So I never get to participate, but And the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis has a professors conference. So if you're looking for other places, outlets to present your work, they are looking for people that come from Extension as well. And then for teachers, and to promote participation for teachers getting professional development, Council for Economic Education has an annual conference in the fall. So that's coming up. All of these, everything in the slideshow has a link. So if you do actually get the slides, you can get right to them. And Andrew, thank you so much for putting all those in there. The Next Gen Personal Finance has really come on strong the last few years. It has professional development in a few different formats. So you can do on demand. They also have workshops online, and Selena has them come and even physically and do workshops. We've had them come in the past. And then always, if you do have a state council, or you do have centers, you know, working with them and promoting the participation through that. More places to get lessons and resources. Teachers want things that they can put in, just like extension agents, they can put in and run right like that, right? So everything in there. So the link for the Jumpstart Clearinghouse, Econ Ed link is searchable, so you can put in different ages, classrooms, topics, all kind of things. You can create your account and save things. There's not just lessons, but also calculators, videos, Kahoots, like active learning things, a lot of special collections around personal finance, and FDIC, CFPB. Federal Reserve is huge in this space as far as supporting educators, creating curriculum, like go on and on about how this is a great resources of the Federal Reserve, especially because you can order their materials and there's no charge. And found this, did you guys know about this? So, when I was researching, I found a Course in Journal of Extension article by Barb O'Neill that talked about NEFI's evaluation template. And I was like, look at that. And then wrote to my friend at NEFI, and she was like, oh, this is where it's housed now. And I was like, oh, I didn't even know this existed. So throwing that out there. So that's NEFI's evaluation toolkit that already comes with questions on these topics. And then the NEFI funding opportunities Elizabeth talked about earlier, the shift of NEFI into research, and more of us are, you know, want to participate in these opportunities. So I went ahead and put that in there. I think we could do some more brainstorming about what are the funding opportunities in this space, because we need to know about them, but that's as far as I got. So if anybody else wants to talk in or chime in about funding opportunities, we've got just a couple of minutes.
Or the Q&A.
Thank you, everybody, for showing up today and being with us and your participation. We really appreciate it.
And there's so much more, right?
yes,
and
I
and
know.
it's so exciting. So I hope you all feel the energy and can experience days like Selena, or very few days where you don't want to go to work on this stuff.
Selena, thank you for being with us today, and thank you for your incredible work.
I am happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, thanks everyone, and we'll see you next month at the May 22nd webinar on consumer decision making.